Listening Library presents Avengers Endgame by Marvel Press, adapted by Steve Behling, read for you by Tom Taylorson.
Prologue. It was about as close to a perfect day as Clint Barton had ever experienced. The sun was high in the sky, the air warm yet breezy. He had worked hard for this homestead, had been through so much over the years in the service of first S.H.I.E.L.D. and then the Avengers. The farmhouse was his reward, his respite, his safe place, and he had a family with whom to share it. Clint took a lungful of fresh air and stood next to his daughter, Lila. In her hands, she grasped a bow. "Okay, hold on," Clint cautioned, instructing her on the finer points of archery. "Don't shoot." Looking over his shoulder, Clint saw his wife, Laura, preparing their meal at a nearby picnic table. He smiled, then turned his attention back to Lila. He held a handful of arrows in his hand as he moved around behind his daughter. "You see where you're going?" Clint checked, nodding his head slightly to indicate the target hanging from a tree some yards away. "Mm-hmm," Lila answered. "Okay, now let's worry about how you get there," Clint said. "Just gotta move your foot here." He continued the lesson by using the toe of his boot to guide and reposition Lila's left foot, so it was pointing in the precise direction. "Point your toe this way," he encouraged. "Right here." Standing behind Lila, Clint helped adjust her posture to make sure she had the proper archery stance. Together, they eyed the target. "Your hips here, okay? Can you see?" "Yeah." Then Clint took a handful of Lila's hair, brushing it in front of her eyes, teasing her. "How about now? Can you see now?" Lila started to laugh. "No!" Clint continued to mess with his daughter's view, covering one of her eyes with his hand. "How about now?" Clint asked, and now they were both laughing. While Clint handed Lila an arrow, he took note of his two sons, Nathaniel and Cooper, playing catch in a field behind them. Both boys were getting so big. "All right, ready? 3 fingers." Clint reminded Lila of her grip on the bowstring. "Nice!" came the call from afar. Clint turned his head slightly to see Cooper catching a baseball with his glove. The boy stepped forward with his right foot, throwing the ball to his brother. Nathaniel caught it in his glove with ease. Then it was back to Cooper. "Nice throw, kiddo!" Laura shouted from the picnic table. "Hey, you guys want mayo or mustard, or both?" Lila had taken the arrow and placed it into the bow. She held it with 3 fingers, just like her dad had taught her. She took aim at the target and focused, then suddenly relaxed her stance and lowered the bow and arrow. Lila looked at her dad like she couldn't believe what she just heard. "Who puts mayo on a hot dog?" Lila said, and she laughed again. Clint waved to his wife. "Probably your brothers," he joked as an aside to Lila. Then he yelled, 2 mustard, please." "Thanks, Mama." "Got it," Laura called back. Then she turned to Nathaniel. "Nate, mayo or mustard? How about ketchup?" Nate requested. "Or ketchup, I got ketchup too," Laura acknowledged. Clint had moved several feet behind Lila to give her space, as she raised the bow and aimed the arrow at the target. "Mind your elbow," Clint said, watching her every move. She inhaled, exhaled, and let the arrow loose from the bow. It shot through the air and found its target a split second later, landing dead center in the bullseye. Clint smiled, stepped forward, and high-fived Lila. "Good job, Hawkeye," Clint exclaimed proudly. "Go get your arrow." "Hey guys, enough practice. Soup's on," Laura called out from the picnic table. "All right, we're coming. We're hungry," Clint replied. He walked over to the target, but didn't see Lila anywhere. He scanned around, but found no sign of his daughter. "Lila, let's go." "Lila?" Where was she? Taking a few more steps, Clint focused his gaze on the target on the tree. Then he looked down beneath it and picked something up off the ground. Lila's arrow. Where had she gone? "Honey?" Clint yelled. But there was no reply. "Hey, babe?" Still no response. It suddenly seemed so quiet. Clint walked away from the target, toward the field and the picnic table, but he saw no sign of Laura, nor any of Cooper and Nathaniel either. His fingers released the arrow, which dropped as he sprinted toward the table, looking wildly all around him. "Babe! Babe!" Clint hollered, but received no reply. Then he whistled loudly. "Boys! Boys! Laura!" But there was no one to answer him. It was just Clint Barton, standing in the field behind his family farmhouse, alone. Chapter 1. "You don't need to do that," Tony Stark said, concentrating on the task at hand. He was sitting at a table inside the Guardians of the Galaxy's spaceship. He had just flicked a small piece of silver paper, folded up in a triangle across the table and in between Nebula's thumbs. Goal. With her swift reflexes, however, Nebula had caught the paper football. She grunted and looked at Tony. "Because, you're just holding the position," he explained. Then he put his hands on the table, index fingers outstretched and touching, both thumbs pointed upward. He nodded for Nebula to take her shot. Balancing the football on one pointed end, Nebula flicked the piece of paper with a finger and watched as it sailed through the air over the table, missing the goal completely. It landed on Tony's arm. "Oh yeah." Tony championed her attempt. "That was close." Nebula grunted. She took the paper football in her hand and set it up once more. This time she flicked the football a little more toward the right. It sailed over the table, right between Tony's thumbs. "That's a goal," Tony confirmed, a smile in his voice. Nebula straightened visibly and put both of her hands on the table. "We are now one apiece," Tony proclaimed, keeping score of the game. "I would like to try again," Nebula determined. She was fascinated with something so simple as a game, in particular one that didn't involve actively trying to defeat a foe by pummeling them into submission in an ill-fated attempt to please her adoptive father, Thanos. But her history also provoked her competitive nature. She flicked the paper football again, missing the goal. Then Tony took another kick. The football went through the goal posts. Tony was ahead. But Nebula was a swift learner. Another flick of the football, and she made another goal. "We're tied up," Tony stated for her benefit. Nebula placed her hands on the table to form the goal again. She looked down at her hands, then across the table at her adversary, assessing him. "Feel the tension? It's fun," Tony noted playfully. Then he flicked the football, watching his shot go horribly awry. "That was terrible. Now you have a chance to win," he explained gently, if a bit patronizing. Taking the football once more, Nebula placed it on the table, flicked it. The piece of paper went right in between Tony's thumbs, landing on his lap. "And you've won," he smiled. Nebula sat back. The words, "and you've won," were not ones her ears were accustomed to hearing. "Congratulations! Fair game." Then Tony did something that both surprised and baffled Nebula. He extended a hand across the table and held it there. She didn't know what to do at first, but then she thought, "Does he expect me to take his hand? To what? Rip it off?" Then she thought better and extended her hand slowly in kind. Then she grasped his hand. Following Tony's lead, the two shook. "Good sport," Tony said. "Did you have fun?" "It was fun," Nebula admitted, and she couldn't believe it. Another game of football later, and Tony had retired to the flight deck of the ship. He was sitting on the cold metal floor, holding his Iron Man helmet. The headpiece was battle-damaged, and wouldn't serve as a fully functioning helmet unless Tony enacted some major league repairs. But his resources in space were limited, and repairing the helmet wasn't what he had in mind. He reached inside and found a small button. Pressing it, Tony activated the helmet's recording function. A beam of light shone out from the helmet's eyes, directed at Tony. He leaned back, sighed, and stared into the eyes of the helmet. "This thing on?" he joked. "Hey, Miss Potts, Pep. If you find this recording, don't post it on social media. It's going to be a real tearjerker." As the helmet recorded Tony's every move and word, the light emitting from it flickered. "I don't know if you're ever going to see these," Tony said, referring to the many messages he had recorded in his time away from her. "I don't even know if you're still... Oh, God, I hope so."
Sample complete. Ready to continue?